Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to E-Schoolhouse. This is our weekly live series called Inspirations from the House, where we bring parents all kinds of information to help them inspire their children to get the absolute most out of their education. My name is Deborah Kalinikos. I am an engineer turned educator, and it's my mission to engineer a change in education one family at a time. Every week in this live series, we bring you information to help you, parents, coach your children into getting the absolute most out of their education. Now, if you're watching this in our Facebook page, you won't have access to all of these videos that we've been doing over the last several months, but we have them all in a unit on our Facebook, in our Facebook group. So if you would like to join that Facebook group, just click the link above and you will get to see all of these videos from our Inspirations from the House series. So today we're going to talk about screen time, and I want to first tell you how this all came about. So, I'm interested in all things education, and I've been talking to several people who are very concerned about, wow, my kids are virtually learning and they're on their screens all the time. And so I put up a post just randomly out there on Facebook, and it basically said, the American Association of Pediatricians recommends 2 hours or fewer of screen time per day. Thoughts? That was my post. Oh my gosh, you guys, I got hundreds of people, and there's opinions and flying everything. And I realized I've hit on something. So I thought, okay, I need to learn more about it because I do have children. They are grown. I'm a grandparent now. But when I was raising my kids, I didn't have to worry about screen times. This is pretty new. So I thought, okay, let me go do some research and start reading. And I went down this rabbit hole. Let me tell you, it was actually very, very interesting and enlightening. And I thought, okay, so I want to bring this information together for you so that you can kind of see, kind of go down the rabbit hole with me. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to put this all in perspective. Now, in order to get definitive data and information, you've got to do long-term studies, okay? Studies with thousands of participants over many years in order to actually make a declaration about something such as how much is too much time on a screen. We need long-term studies. Those are called longitudinal studies. Smartphones and tablets have only entered the scene really in the last 10 years. Okay, it was 13 years ago that the iPhone was actually introduced. 13 years ago. Does that blow your mind? That's actually in 2007. That's the same year Netflix started streaming. It feels like we've had these things forever. Okay, 10 years ago is where tablets were introduced for the first time. Now, we've had TV and computers for a really long time. So we do have information about how much is too much on a TV or on a computer. But having these smartphones and these portable devices has taken that stuff that we used to just watch on a TV, and now it's portable. Okay, so people are on their screens a lot now, which is kind of crazy, but that's really what I want to talk about today. Technology is changing so fast that it has become difficult for scientists to keep up with trying to figure out these questions. It takes years to get this data, and we've only had smartphones and tablets for the last decade. So I just wanted to put that in perspective for you. Now, one thing that scientists do know about these screens is what it does to the dopamine levels in your brain. It increases dopamine, and that's the feel-good hormone. So when your dopamine levels go up, you want more of whatever's causing the dopamine levels to go up. We do know that for sure, and screens definitely do that to our brains. So here's the deal. We know that there's got to be some kind of effect. We don't really know what that is. But what are you as parents supposed to do? Okay, so I have found several different studies, and I will, over the next few days, post those for you. I will reference them here, but then I'll link you to them. So in case you want to read their entirety, you will have that information available to you. One very interesting study, it's called the ABCD, which I thought was pretty cute, and that stands for the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. It's a long-term study that just started a few years ago. So it's going to be a 10-year study. And what they're doing is they're taking almost 12,000 children ages 8 through 10, and they're going to watch them over a 10-year span. Now, a lot of the data that they're collecting is self-reporting. So the parents will have to report, how much time the kids are spending on their screens and other things. They're looking for other things, but they're also taking measurements periodically. So, it's going to be a 10-year study. And as we know, especially with technology, so much can change in 10 years. Okay. So let's go back to this study. One data point that they took, and I found this super interesting, about 4,500 children. They looked at their brain scans. They scanned their brains to see what they would find. And the brain scans actually showed a difference. We're talking about 9 and 10-year-olds, a difference in the children's brains when the children spent more than 7 hours a day on a screen. Compared to children who spend less than, their brain scans were very different. And what they found was this. The scans showed, pardon me, that the cortex of these children's brains was actually thinner than the children who spent less time on a screen. Now, if you're going, whoa, and you're freaking out, don't. Because when you read stuff like that, at least when I read stuff like that, I'm like, okay, but what's the norm? Is that expected or not? I don't know. Okay, the thinning of the cortex happens as children grow older. So by the time they're teenagers, their cortex has thinned out. That's normal brain growth. What they saw was that it appeared to or seemed to be happening sooner. All we can really pull out of that is that there may be a connection. It's nothing definitive. Don't have enough time to study it. Okay. Now, here's what experts are saying. In the beginning, I talked about how the American Association of Pediatricians recommends 2 hours of screen time, recreational screen time. Okay. Not learning screen time, but recreational. They just don't want kids sitting around looking at tablets, and they recommended the 2 hours. So that's pretty much what everybody goes by. Okay. As you're experiencing right now, it's not really realistic, is it, with all the virtual learning? So this is why I wanted to dig more into it. There's another study called the Common Sense Media. And again, I will link that for you. But what they did is they looked at 8 to 11-year-olds, and these kids that exceeded that 2-hour time limit. And the kids who exceeded the 2-hour time on screen scored lower on cognitive testing skills, thinking skills, like problem solving, memorization, those types of things. So when the kids spent more than 2 hours on a screen, what they noticed was that their cognitive assessments were lower. And they also noticed that their hyperactivity was more. Okay, but keep in mind, okay, this does not actually definitively give you a causal relationship, okay? If the screens cause you to not think very well, that's not what it's saying, okay? You get two different things. You've got cognitive ability and you've got screen time. Did this cause this, or did this cause this? All they know is that they're connected. We don't know how they're connected. So let me put it to you this way. If you've got a child who's just naturally super curious, who is just always thinking about stuff, because that's how his brain works, he is less likely to go pick up a screen and watch a video. Okay, so maybe that's what's going on. All right, so does A cause B, or does B cause A? This is what we don't know. Okay, this is why we need to do these long-term studies. And this is why I hope that the information I bring to you today, especially you parents of really young kids, I think you're going to feel really good about what's going on. Okay, what they have found, and again, we don't know what's causing what, but there is a link between less screen time and better cognitive scores. That's all we know. There is a link. Okay, that's not saying that screens cause that screen time causes lower cognitive scores. It's not what it's saying. It's just saying that there's a link. Okay, so children who spent fewer than 2 hours on screens, listen to this very carefully. Children that spent less than 2 hours on screens scored 4% higher on thinking related tests than children who spent more time on their screens. So the less time spent on screens, the higher the score, 4%. Is that statistically significant? That was actually my first question. Okay, well, 4%, yeah, it's higher, but is that statistically significant? And for this particular thing that I was reading, they didn't really talk about the numbers, how many people or how many children they actually surveyed. So, but here's the question. I don't know that that's relevant, you guys. If they had taken a group of kids and said, okay, for the next month, 2 hours or less of screen time. That's it. Every single day, 2 hours or less. And then they did a thinking test. And then they took those exact same kids and said, okay, go crazy with the screen time. Watch as much as you want. Do as much as you want over the next month or so. And then they give them another thinking test. Same kids. And then they compared the data. That might be a little more meaningful. I hope you're following me here. So we can't just blanketly say Group A and Group B and compare them because we don't really know who's in the groups, okay? Could it be that the kids who are deeper thinkers naturally don't gravitate towards the screens? It very well could be that. It also could be this. The kids who are scoring higher on these thinking-related tests, perhaps they're doing more of the things that increase cognitive abilities. Let me say that again. Kids who score higher on these cognitive tests may just be doing more of the things that cause higher scores. Okay? They're not on their screens, they're doing these other things. So you see, you really can't say what screens are causing and what they're not. So as I was reading through this, I kind of came up with something that I thought would be really helpful for you. Okay, let me get this up here. Okay. What these studies look at is screen use, period. They don't talk about what the kids are doing when they're on the screens. So I thought I would, okay? So let's look at, while using a screen, what are children actually doing? And I compared this for school-age children, and then I also compared this for preschool kids. So we're first going to look at school-age children. What are they actually doing when they're on the screen? Well, they're watching and observing. They're sitting or laying down, or they're listening or hearing something, okay? None of those are bad, but they are all passive, okay? Nothing wrong with those things. If your child is now engaged in virtual learning and they're sitting and looking at a screen, they might be doing those passive things, but they also might be participating in a discussion. They might be taking notes. They might be reproducing a demonstration that the teacher is doing, which means they're actually manipulating things. Those things are not passive. Those are active. Yes, they're still sitting, but they're more engaged in what's going on. Okay? So while the kid is on a screen, this is what they're doing. I thought it was also important to look at, while using a screen, what are they not doing? While your child is using that screen, what are some things that they're not doing? Well, they're not moving. Although I will say, a friend of mine posted an adorable video of her 8-year-old son doing virtual PE. The computer was on the kitchen table, and this little boy was running around the table. It was the cutest thing ever because all the kids in his little Zoom group were doing the same thing. And the video was of him giggling like crazy and running around the table. And I thought, okay, well, he's using a screen and he is moving. Okay. Other things, being creative. A lot of people associate screen use with just this passive sit and get. Not necessarily. They could be engaged in some type of problem-solving activity or a puzzle with other kids. Very possible if your kid is on virtual learning. The other thing, manipulating toys that stimulate creativity. This is critical for really, really young children. But even as kids get older, especially if they're kinesthetic learners, they need to have that tactile experience. But if your child is following a demonstration and participating actively with the demonstration while he's watching a screen, he might actually be doing this, okay? And all of these things help children learn, okay? Now, while they're on a screen, probably he's not exploring outdoors, which is something that all children need. While using a screen, he's probably not learning about the real world around them. And I mean their environment around them. Not watching a video about an environment, but their actual environment. Actively playing with other children, again, that's critical. And we do have research to show all these things. Being bored. Okay, this is my favorite because this is where your child is almost forced to be creative. They have to be bored. So if your child is on a screen, chances are they're not bored, okay? I wanted to show you all these things here, what they're doing on a screen and what they're not doing, so that you can see that even though your child is on a screen, he's not necessarily passive. Okay, there's a lot of active things that can happen. And when I was going through all the research, I didn't find anything that talked about the different use of screens. I just really want you to keep that in mind. Now, I want to look at very quickly preschool children. And it's the same thing. When you've got a little bitty child, what are they doing if they're using a screen? Well, it's kind of the same thing, you know, watching and observing, sitting and listening. But what are they not doing? Okay, if your child is on a screen, he's not sitting in your lap having you read a book to him. He's not talking to you about the book or about anything else. He's not engaged in conversation. He isn't moving around, which is really critical for his development. The most important thing for children, little preschool children, the most important things, and I've highlighted these here so you can see them, they have to manipulate with toys to stimulate their creativity. Blocks, little cars, painting, those kinds of things are critical for young children. Exploring their environment is also really, really critical for a young child. And actively playing with other children. You know, these are the things that little ones don't do if they're on a screen. Watching and imitating adults is critical for a child's development. So these are the things that your child, let me go back. These are the things that your preschool child is not doing when he's on a screen. Now, look at this list very carefully. My guess is your child is not all day just watching, sitting, and listening. You're doing all these other things too, okay? So I just want to make sure we keep this all in perspective. For me, as I was reading through the research, it really came down to two things. Is it active or is it passive? Okay, active versus passive. There is a real difference. If your child is just, you know, watching YouTube videos, and you know how it is with YouTube, you know, one after another, that is very, very different than getting on a Zoom call with his teacher. Very different. Okay, yes, they're still using a screen, but using it so differently. So this is something that I really wanted to make sure people were thinking about. Okay, so there are several takeaways from all of this. Number one, the studies really can't say whether it is the screen time that hurts the thinking skills. We don't know that. Is it the screen time or is it the lack of those other things? Okay, we need those other things to help children improve their memory skills and their problem solving skills. Maybe it's not what they're doing on the screen that's hurting, but what's hurting them is that they're not doing these other things. They're not playing outside. They're not exploring in nature. They're not engaged hands-on with other people, and they're not interacting with others. Now, let me ask you something. Am I describing your child? Yeah, I didn't think so. I'm sure your children are doing those things. Yeah, they're using screens, okay? But they're doing those other things too, okay? Screens might one thing that they might do, again, they're starting to see a correlation. They might inhibit how your child learns. If your child is too much watching a screen, and that's mostly how they're getting input, that might limit their ability to explore other learning modalities. Just something to keep in mind. Again, we don't have information to tell us if that's what's going on or not. Human behavior is so unpredictable. We don't really know what causes what. Okay, any given day, think about it. There's a day you're just really having a rough one. You just want to watch a couple of hours of videos. You want to binge watch something, but the next day you don't care about it. So there's so many different things in human behavior that we just can't really look at so quickly as the technology is changing so quickly. So this is why we need long-term studies, and we're in the middle of those right now. I can't even emphasize enough how much technology is changing. So I went to engineering school back in the 80s, and I learned how to program using punch cards. I know what you guys are thinking. What are punch cards? See? And I'm not that old, you guys. This is how quickly things are changing. So it is very, very difficult to get the data that we need, around these things. What we do know, we do have scientific data that tells us to have your child get the absolute most health-wise, they need proper sleep, adequate exercise, proper nutrition, and replacing as many sedentary behaviors with active ones as possible. They need their brains engaged also. Children simply need these things for their overall health. Okay, it just kind of comes down to habits, right? Good, healthy habits. Screens are part of your lives now, but that can be introduced as in a healthy way. Okay, it seems it all comes down to parents just coaching their children on how to self-regulate regarding screens. Okay, what's the best way to teach your child how to self-regulate when it comes to screen use? Model it for them. Children learn so much by watching adults and imitating them. I get it. I totally get it. It is so easy to get just drawn into social media, and you just start scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And guess what? That's how they're designed, on purpose, to keep you there. It's not evil. No, there's nobody got any evil intent, but that's how they're designed, to keep you on their platforms. So it's going to be up to us to self-regulate and say, okay, I've spent enough time scrolling through this Instagram, whatever. I just need to get off. Self-regulate and help your children to learn how to do that too. So you guys are pioneers. Let's face it. I didn't raise my kids with screens, and that's just a generation away. You are pioneers. So until we know the results of these long-term studies, what are you supposed to do? Let me say that again. You are pioneers, okay? Until we know the results of these long-term studies, what are you supposed to do? I'm going to ask that a different way. I don't tend to look at life that way. I look at it like this. Yes, you are pioneers. You are the first generation to raise children with all this technology. But do you really need a long-term study to tell you what's best for your children? Do you really need that data to tell you what is best for your child? Yeah, I didn't think so. You are the expert on your child. You know that child better than anybody. As long as your child is doing, let me pull this back up for you. As long as your child is doing these other things, moving, being creative, manipulating things, solving problems, reading stories, as long as your child is doing all of those things, she's going to be fine. She's going to be fine. If you need to cook dinner and you hand her a screen for 30 minutes, she's going to be fine. Okay? Now, I'm not one to just give information and not give like some definitive step, something to actually go and do. So here's what I'd like to propose. over the next week or two, just start to pay attention to when your child is on the screen. What is he actually doing? Is he doing passive things or active things? Now, again, the passive things are not bad, but that's really what we want to limit. But all the other stuff, their brains are engaged in their thinking. Okay. So pay attention to that. How much time are they spending actively on the screen as opposed to passively? I think you're going to be really pleased with the results, especially if your children are in virtual school. There's a lot of active teaching going on there. Okay. The other thing you need to make sure is that your child is eating well, is getting proper exercise, and does get enough sleep. Children need 9 to 11 hours of sleep every night. And we do know that the blue light, the backlight from tablets and iPhones can actually inhibit melatonin production, which helps children sleep, especially in that REM state of sleep. So just don't let them watch the screen a couple hours before bedtime. Okay. I think there's a lot of people just really, they don't know. And so there's all this, almost parent shaming. I hate to use those words because they're so strong, but if you need your child to be on a screen so you can get some work done, it's okay. It's okay. Okay. And if grandma or somebody wants to say something bad about it, that's your child. You are the expert. Okay. You're the expert. So I really hope that this has helped you. I don't want anybody to think they're doing something wrong because their child's screen time exceeds that 2 hours that the AAP recommends. I think we have to look at what they're doing on the screen. That's more important, I think, than the time. So as I was pulling all the information together for this, I really wanted to talk to a teacher who teaches virtually, and I am going to do that, but this is already so long. So here's what this is going to happen. I'm super excited about this. We are going to have on a virtual teacher, one of our own group members. Her name is Nikki Ippolito, and I am going to interview her about her experiences teaching virtually and the kind of things that she does to really engage her students. So look for that next week on Inspirations from the House. Meanwhile, be watching the Facebook group for the sightings of these research things that I went through. I read so much, you guys. I got like 5 posts coming at you, but I just think it's really important for you to at least know the information. Bottom line is this: you are the expert on your child. Make sure that what they're doing is more active than passive. I sure hope that was helpful. I really thank you for hanging out with me today, and I will see you guys next week on Inspirations from the House. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.